All right, we'll just clap. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Paramahansa Bhagavad Gita Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad's Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Now, I believe we're on text 5. Maybe you were here last night, Daniel. Chapter 6, page 309.
Peter, do you know what Bhagavad Gita is?
Okay. Tyler? Huh?
309?
309. Page, text 5? You have text 5 there?
Yeah, it's 7.5.
Yeah. Turn that on and close the door because they're having a party out there. Okay. So what, does it look right to you, Daniel? Did we read text 4? I think we did. The 8.
Yeah, we read text 4.
8 material energies. Yeah, we dealt with it. Okay. Yeah, just turn the fan on. Oh, you're turning the high fan on.
No, that makes too much noise, right?
Yeah, we can just use that little fan. Just don't stop the oscillation. And yeah. Perfect. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 27th day of September already. On this 27th day of September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 7 entitled Knowledge of the Absolute. Text number 5 on page 309. Apareyam itas tvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat apadeyam mitastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat apare mitastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat apare mitastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat apare mitastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat apare mitastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Go ahead, Tyler. Apareyam itastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Anyone else? Apareyam itastvanyam prakatim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Okay, 15 seconds for teaching you about the Sanskrit pronunciation. That little word "to," you see that? That became a TV. It's a little tricky. What happens when you have the word "to," which always means "but," it means "on the other hand." So he's contrasting the spiritual energy, the living entities, with the material energies in the previous verse. Yeah. So that "to" that the "u" in "to" becomes a "v" when the next word begins with a vowel. So it's apareyam itas tvanyam. You see how that tvanyam? Yeah. Tvanyam. Yeah. All right. So maybe we'll take some time. It's a Sanskrit. It's very. All right. I'll read the word by words. Apara, inferior, iyam, this, itaha, besides this, two, but, anyam, another, prakatim, energy, vidhi, just try to understand, me, my, param, superior, jiva bhutam, comprising the living entities, mahabaho, almighty armed one, yaya, by whom, idam, this, dharyate, is utilized or exploited, jagat, the material world. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. Purport. Here it is clearly mentioned that living entities belong to the superior nature or energy of the Supreme Lord. The inferior energy is matter manifested in different elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Both forms of material nature, namely gross, earth, etc., and subtle, mind, etc., are products of the inferior energy. The living entities who are exploiting these inferior energies for different purposes are the superior energy of the Supreme Lord. And it is due to this energy that the entire material world functions. The cosmic manifestation has no power to act unless it is moved by the superior energy, the living entity. Energies are always controlled by the energetic, and therefore the living entities are always controlled by the Lord. They have no independent existence. They are never equally powerful, as unintelligent men think. The distinction between the living entities and the Lord is described in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.87.30 as follows. Now before I read this is the prayers of the personified Vedas near the end of the 10th canto. And this meter, chanda, is hard to chant. And I remember when we came through, because I've been here so long, we've already gone through in the Srimad Bhagavatam class. We got to this 87th chapter. First of all, they're so long that it couldn't be fitted on the board. That's the first thing, so they're very small letters. And then no one could chant it, and you'll hear why. So here's how the verse goes. Don't try to chant along. Apadamatarn dubasthanubato yadisarvagatas tarhin shashati tinhiyamo dubanetanata ajaniyan mayam tadamamuchaniyan drabhavet asamamanugyanatam hiramatam manadushtataya. Nice, huh? Only in Sanskrit. O Supreme Eternal, if the so this is the personified Vedas offering their prayers to Mahavishnu before the creation. So this is, they're addressing, always Supreme Eternal, they're addressing the Lord. O Supreme Eternal, if the embodied living entities were eternal and all-pervading like you, then they would not be under your control. But if the living entities are accepted as minute energies of your Lordship, then they are at once subject to your supreme control. Therefore, real liberation entails surrender by the living entities to your control, and that surrender will make them happy. In that constitutional position only can they be controllers. Therefore, men with limited knowledge who advocate the monistic theory that God and the living entities are equal in all respects are actually guided by a faulty and polluted opinion. The Supreme Lord Krishna is the only controller, and all living entities are controlled by him. These living entities are his superior energy because the quality of their existence is one and the same with the Supreme, but they are never equal to the Lord in quantity of power. While exploiting the gross and subtle inferior energy, matter, the superior energy, the living entity, forgets his real spiritual mind and intelligence. This forgetfulness is due to the influence of matter upon the living entity. But when the living entity becomes free from the influence of the illusory material energy, he attains the stage called mukti, or liberation. The false ego, under the influence of material illusion, thinks, I am matter, and material acquisitions are mine. His actual position is realized when he is liberated from all material ideas, including the conception of his becoming one in all respects with God. Therefore, one may conclude that the Gita confirms the living entity to be only one of the multi-energies of Krishna. And when this energy is freed from material contamination, it becomes fully Krishna conscious or liberated. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshru Unmritam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So I've kind of been thinking about this theme for some time, so I'm going to try it out on this audience and see what you think. In today's world, as in in every world, but especially today, it's very easy to understand how a certain group of people, just think of the United States for now, are very upset because a whole other group of people seem to be acting and believing things that aren't true, and therefore causing havoc for everyone else. Now, this is not a question of what's true and what's not true. They're both wrong. They're both an illusion. This is just material politics now. But if one consistently believes something to be true that's not true, you can see how that's going to eventually cause a lot of problems, because you're going to run into reality. Reality is going to come out and knock you for a loop, because you've been considering something true that's false. And it's not just some minor thing, but it's your central cause for which you're living. In other words, you're under a big illusion. So, in a sense, this idea, which is central to our whole philosophy, this idea that in our conditioned state, non-Krishna conscious state, this ordinary material consciousness, we're living under a grand illusion, an illusion that we can be happy in the material world, that this, don't put it on a place where you sit, you can put it up behind you if you want, yeah. That, just by way of illustration, Yudhishthira, the elder brother of Arjun, is also one of the heroes of the larger Mahabharata. He really doesn't come in here much personally, but here it's Arjun. And so he occupies a very key role. Yudhishthira, as all of his brothers, they're actually sons of the demigods, because Maharaj Pandu was cursed. They're known as the Pandavas, and in one sense they're all sons of Pandu, but none of them are seminal sons of Pandu, believe it or not, although they're known as Pandavas. He was cursed. It's kind of a long story, but he was cursed so that if he ever had sex with either of his two wives, he would immediately die. And so this is a problem. How is he going to have children? So Kunti, one of his wives, she has a prominent role to play in the Mahabharata, and she appears very prominently in the Bhagavatam, especially in the first canto. She had a blessing from Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni visited the kingdom that the Pandavas had at the time, and she served him very nicely. She cooked and so forth, and so he wanted to give her a blessing. So he gave her a blessing that she could call any of the demigods at any time, and they would come. She was just a young girl, maybe a teenager at the time. So then he left, and she wanted to try it out. You know, she wanted to try out this power. So she prayed to the sun god to come, and he came. There's one painting, an amazing painting. It's in the Chicago temple. Huge painting on the wall. And it shows her shocked, and there's the sun god has come into the room, you know. So anyway, what happened was the sun god appears, and then she bows down and, you know, offers some prayers, you know. And then he says, well, now that I've come, we have to have some offspring. He says, no, I'm a virgin girl, I can't do that. So don't worry, you'll remain a virgin. So she has a child, she remains a virgin, and that's actually the elder brother of all the Pandavas. His name is Karna. And he's very powerful. He appears with a little baby with a little set of armor on him to show how he's going to be really martial, you know. So later on, she says, oh my God, this is a disaster. So she goes out, and just like the Bible, she takes the little baby, puts him in a nice little boat she constructed, and puts him in a little river, and down he goes. And he's picked up out of the river by a couple down a few miles away, and they say, oh, we should take care of this baby. And so they raise him, but his genesis is that he's a powerful Kshatriya. In fact, he's a better warrior than Arjun even. Anyway, it's a long story, but he's not accepted as a Pandavas, and then he goes over on Duryodhana's side, when finally he's an ally. So what happened was when she married Pandu, And he was cursed, and you want to have some children. So he authorizes her to call different demigods. And so each of Arjuna is the son of Indra with Kunti. Yudhishthira is the son of Yamaraj by Kunti. And Bhima, powerful Bhima, is the son of the Vayu, the wind god by Kunti. And they have two other half-brothers, but Madri, the other one. And that was the Ashwini Kumaras, the kind of semi-demigods. So anyway, this is and the reason why I'm mentioning that is that they went through so many austerities. Because Duryodhana, and it's a long story, Dhritarashtra, who was the first one to speak in the Bhagavad Gita, he asked his secretary, Sanjay, what did these armies do when they came? Sanjay, they're sitting in the palace, but Sanjay has a mystic power. He can visualize at a distance what's going on and hear. So he's reporting, like a live reporter, sitting next to Dhritarashtra, what's going on the battlefield. So anyway, they're wandering in the forest. They were exiled for a while. They went through so many austerities, but they were great devotees of Krishna. So he saved them at every step. So they're in the forest, and Yamaraj, who's the father of Yudhishthira, but he doesn't. Anyway, it goes on. So they need water. They're all thirsty. So he says, Arjuna, go find some water. So Arjuna goes and he wanders, and he comes upon a nice lake and pool of water. He wants to take some. But before he takes a drink, he hears a disembodied voice. You can't take any of that water. This is my pond, until you answer some questions. So Arjuna's a chutney. He says, who's this? And he takes some water, immediately faints. He's unconscious now. So he doesn't come back. So he sends Bhima, powerful Bhima. Same thing happened. Bhima shines it. He's also unconscious. And the two twins go. Same thing happens. So now Yudhishthira is really worried. He's alone with Kunti, so he goes himself. And he's righteousness personified. Because he's the son of Dharma. He's son of Dharmaraj. And so when he is forbidden to drink, he doesn't drink. He says, okay, I'll answer the questions. And there's a whole series of wonderful questions and answers. And the most famous one is, what's the most amazing thing in the world? And he answers like this: Ahanyahani bhutani gachandihi yamalayam sheshikstavanamichanti kimascharamatakparam. Which means that day after day, thousands and thousands of human beings are being taken off to Yamaraj, because they're leading ordinary lives, devoid of Krishna consciousness, sinful lives. And then the ones who are left know this fact. Everyone knows after a while you live in this world, people die. Eventually your mother may die, grandfather, grandmother. Everyone dies, right? But those who are left, the answer to the question, what's the most amazing thing, is that those who are left are acting and living as if they'll never die, even though everyone is taken off. And so this is part of Maya's trick, is that this all comes up at the end of the third chapter. There's a whole question that Arjuna asks a question. Adhikena yukto ham papam charari purusha anacham abhivarshanaya kimascha balariva niyojita. He asks Krishna a question which we may really relate to. If we've ever been, I was never addicted to hard drugs. I'm in the movement 50 years, so we go back, when I was 21. I'm almost 75 now. I lived, believe it or not, I lived 2 blocks from Tompkins Square Park. Does that name ring a bell to you? Tompkins Square Park? No. That was the first place that Prabhupada started chanting Hare Krishna. It's just 2 blocks from 22nd Avenue where he started the movement. But I came in 68, I was living there. He started everything in 66. But when I came, I would hear, they would be chanting on the street. I would hear them, ching, ching, ching. But my mind was so far away from that, I couldn't be attracted at that point. Luckily, later I did. So, where was I? Yeah, so the most amazing thing. So the idea is that we're all living in this grand illusion, and everyone is convinced that he's doing the right thing, and that he's living a normal life, trying to get a good job and so forth. But when you think about it, it's impossible to be happy here, because whatever you have whether it's some money, or you have some position, or you have a family, whatever it is, eventually you grow old and it's all taken away from you when you die, you know, either before you die or after you die. So everything you put your effort into to try to accumulate and gain in this life is taken away. So the real question is, that we should have is there any way out of this? Is this all there is? You know, and I remember the existentialist movement in the 60s was very prominent, and said, no, this is all there is. It's all simply atoms in the void. And so the only question, according to Camus, was suicide. Should we commit suicide or not? Because it has no meaning, you know, like that. But this is all part of Maya's trick, is that because you can't see with your present eyes, we can't see the spirit, we can't even see the soul, what to speak of the Supreme Soul. And therefore, talk of God and all these things, you can easily, if you have a mind to do it, you can easily just reject it. And just live for the moment, for the senses and like that, you know. But by the grace of great souls like Srila Prabhupada, they bring the knowledge and they personify the knowledge. And what they show us how to do is that you can experience a pleasure that's transcendental to all of these changes of the material body. And that even in old age and even in disease and in death, you can still feel the protection of the Lord, the presence of God. And you can live in this world in a way that's not bound by the limitations of time and the limitations of space. And so what the Krishna is doing now, if you recall at the end of the previous chapter, he spoke all about the Ashtanga Yoga, the meditative yoga. And the idea was to withdraw the mind from matter and place it on spirit. And in order to do that, the Ashtanga Yoga system, you go alone, away from the distractions. Forget about San Diego. You have to go into the mountains, you know, somewhere, you know, and somehow exist that way. So they're free of distraction, very mode of goodness, and you can sit and you work with the mind. And there's certain techniques. First of all, how you sit counts very much, and also the breathing process. I did that. Even my little, ABCs of pranayama, I felt the effects. You know, you feel the effects of hatha yoga. So, but the goal of that is ultimately to become fixed on the soul and the super soul within. That's described in the previous chapter. And who is that super soul? It's an expansion of Krishna. He says, make me the ultimate goal of life. But Arjun, it's too difficult. Arjun's a military man. You know, he's a politician. He's involved he's an intimate friend of Krishna, but he's also involved in that. And so representing us, he's representing every man really, he says it's impossible. He says, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balabhadridham. Tasyaham niguham mane vayuivata duskaram. That the mind is very restless. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. It's always flickering this way and that. Just leave it to its own devices and you'll find, this and that and coming and so many things. And I think that to try to control it, which is a basic principle of the body, is like trying to control the wind. They're having a major hurricane scare in Florida now, if you've been following. The whole season, usually starts in June, July, August, nothing. Now in September, a really serious hurricane is coming. And my friend in Florida, he's living in northern Florida, it's coming up Orlando, it looks like it's aiming for them. They're going to be having a lot of winds. So, but you cannot control it. There's no way. It's so powerful wind. So he rejected it, basically. But Krishna encouraged him, no, you can do it by practice, and this and that. And then Arjuna said, okay, but what if I fail? Well, then in the next birth, you can continue like that. So at the end, he says, Yoginam abhisarvesham. Of all the yogis, those who are worshiping me with great and transcendental faith, they're always thinking of me, they're the best of all. So Arjuna is already doing that. He's always remembering Krishna. But for us, Krishna is now explaining the essence of how to be a yogi even in the middle of the city. This powerful process of Krishna consciousness works any place. Now, it's good to have a nice environment, that is very helpful. But you can begin the process of devotional service anywhere. And so, what he says in the first verse, Maya sakta manaparta yogam yunjan manashaya, asangshayang samangam yat agyasati tachunu. Now, hear from me, O son of Putta. Now hear, O son of Prita, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So this is bhakti yoga. When he's talking about mind attached to me, this is a different stage than the Ashtanga yoga, the meditative yoga. The meditative yoga is they're concentrating on the thought, the mind, but the bhakti yogi also deals with the heart. Because what you love, what you're attached to, you're going to think of that automatically. And Krishna is all attractive. The problem is he's so subtle we cannot perceive him with our present eyes. So he's going to teach us now how we can see him even through the material energy, if we understand the science. For instance, he'll say in a few verses, I am the taste of water. I am the light of the sun and the light of the moon. Now why? Because there is energies. In other words, he's the source of the energy, he's the source of our vision, he's the source of our experience of the sight. So in that sense, he is everything through his energies. And therefore, if we remember those verses and then we take some water, we'll think of Krishna. We see the sun, oh, we just think this is Krishna's energy. Now, how this works even more effectively is when we are in the process of bhakti, we try to use the things of this world in Krishna's service. We dovetail. For instance, we're sitting here in a building, like another 1,000 buildings in this city. But what's the difference? Well, the stones and the cement and the wiring and everything that goes into making a building is all connected to Krishna, right? This temple room is as it is. You probably don't know this because it doesn't come up. It's Dharma Setu Babu, who when he was the temple president here in the 90s sometime, I forget exactly when he arranged to have this put in, and these new chandeliers. We had other chandeliers which were much more rudimentary. And now, it even more enlivens you to come in. We have to keep it clean and nice, and everything. But the everything in this room, there's a wonderful saga. It took him a year of effort, a whole bunch of devotees in the I think late 70s, early 80s. And these are devotees artists who did all this work and conceived of it. And Gunagrai Maharaj, who was married at the time, his wife was a wonderful designer. She went to India, got all these things. So all of this is like the result of the service of the devotees. And what does it do? Any place you look, it uplifts you. Oh, there's a picture of Lord Chaitanya. I read about that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the paintings especially, and all of the sculpture and things. What to speak of the deities? The deities are the crown jewel. And then you go there, and it reminds you of Krishna. So the whole idea is that Krishna, through the Bhagavad Gita, and through things like the temple and the process of bhakti, he's reaching out to us. He's making himself visible and audible, and even tasteable through the prasadam, so that we can perceive him through his senses. And if we have the consciousness to do it, then we'll experience more and more of his presence everywhere and in our lives. And we'll start to awaken by the process of doing service. This is service, to hear Krishna's words, to think of his philosophy, and honor his pure devotee by listening to his explanation. That's service to Krishna. And that's why he says, Tat Shanu. Key phrase. Prabhupada picks up on that. Hear from me, now hear from me. And Prabhupada quotes in this first purport these 5 wonderful verses from the 2nd chapter of 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, of how when you hear from Krishna, don't forget he's in your heart as a super soul. He says, oh, this living entity, after millions of births, is finally hearing about me from a proper source. He starts cleansing the heart. He's doing the cleansing. And ultimately, if we keep doing it nicely, then he reveals himself. The last verse says, you perceive him in the heart, you perceive him outside. It's just a question of purification. So back to our verse. So Krishna has spoken and how rare it is, text number 3, to really strive for perfection and to actually achieve it. And then he describes the material energies, which we're all familiar with. We just don't think of them as God's energy. Every solid matter, this is the bhumi, it's known as earth, but everything's solid. That's one kind of energy. Another kind of energy is liquids, water, and all variations on water. Obviously, they're right next to the ocean. It's very, very prominent, very important element. Then fire, the energy, the light, it originates with the sun. All these fossil fuels, the energy was placed in there with the sun. and then buried, and now we're burning it, and everything. And then air and all gases, this is another category of energies, obviously. So it's getting more and more subtle, you see. And then space itself is seen to be an energy, this ether. Then we go inside, mind. Our mind is a subtle energy of Krishna's. It's not spiritual. It's material, and it's being worked by the soul, which is spiritual energy. That's us. So mind, then the intelligence, which is even finer, this discriminating power, which we have much more than the animals. That's why human life is a junction by which we can think of this philosophy and not be controlled by our lower self. In other words, we don't just operate by instinct. The animals also have senses, they have ears and everything, but it's like they're not deciding, oh, well, how can I best use it? No, they don't have that keen intelligence. And so they're more or less operating by instinct. The soul is going through that body, eventually leaves that body, moves up, until you come to human form again. And then after the buddhi, then you have ahankar. This is the false sense of self, the most subtle of these material elements. Why is it a false self? Because we're thinking with the body. The default is, like all the animals, if you're in the body of a dog, hey, I'm a dog. You bite, you bark, you do what dogs do. Right? Then you come out of that body, then you identify with that. So as human beings, we should understand we're not the body. This is the first lesson. I am not the body. Aham brahmasmi, I'm pure spirit. And ahankar is built around the idea, oh, I am the body, therefore let me control and let me enjoy. You see? And that's Maya, that covers our real knowledge. That's the spell of Maya. So Krishna consciousness means to cultivate the consciousness who we really are. We're part and parcel of Krishna. That means that we're, as Prabhupada mentions in this purport so nicely to the 5th verse, we're qualitatively one but quantitatively much different. Like a drop of water in the ocean. We have a little, the salt, the chemicals are there, but it's vastly different than the ocean. So this is our nature. Apara. The apara means not transcendental, inferior. That's that's the earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. There's another prakriti or energy, you should know, which is param, transcendental. This is called jiva bhutas, the jivas, the living entities. And this word, daryate jagat. Daryate means exploiting, or it means sustaining. Just like this body stays as a body as long as we're in it. As soon as we leave, we die. That's all death. We ourselves don't die, never. But the body dies. Then it starts reverting to the different chemicals. You have to burn it, bury it, whatever, cremation, like that. So we're sustaining it. And similarly, Krishna himself is sustaining this whole universe as the super soul. He's there in every atom. And he's also there as the different Vishnus we can get into, in sustaining. So that's how the things are going on. But all the spirit is invisible. We don't see it. And that's why we need to hear from authority and practice the principles by which we can refine our senses so we can eventually see it. So that's my little take on this verse. And if there's any questions or comments, or else we can go on. Okay, now text 6 goes with this also. Etadyonini bhutani. You get sarvani chubadharya. Aham kritsnasya jagata. Prabhavak pralayastata. All created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. Purport. Everything that exists is a product of matter and spirit. Spirit is the basic field of creation, and matter is created by spirit. Spirit is not created at a certain stage of material development. Rather, this material world is manifested only on the basis of spiritual energy. This material body is developed because spirit is present within matter. A child grows gradually to boyhood and then to manhood because that superior energy, the spirit soul, is present. Similarly, the entire cosmic manifestation of the gigantic universe is developed because of the presence of the super soul or Vishnu. Therefore, spirit and matter, which combine to manifest this gigantic universal form, are originally two energies of the Lord, and consequently the Lord is the original cause of everything. A fragmental part and parcel of the Lord, namely the living entity, may be the cause of a big skyscraper, a big factory, or even a big city, but he cannot be the cause of a big universe. The cause of the big universe is the big soul or the supersoul. And Krishna, the Supreme, is the cause of both the big and small souls. Therefore, he is the original cause of all causes. This is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 2.13, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. So, the cause of all causes. Arjuna has an epiphany, if you will, in the 10th chapter, and he recognizes Krishna as the cause of all causes. Of course, he's already an intimate associate of Krishna, but he's playing the part, or Krishna put him into the part of being illusioned so that he could hear the Bhagavad Gita and it could be available for all time. He's got a thing going on here. So, these two natures. Now, this idea that, and this will come up eventually more explicitly in teachings of Lord Chaitanya, when we read CC or you read that book, Teaching of Lord Chaitanya. Achintya beta beta tattva. This is an important concept. And what it means, achintya means inconceivable, beta means different, and abeta means non-different. So everything in existence is inconceivably, simultaneously one with God and different from Him. Now, how is it one? It's one because it's His energy. And for instance, we ourselves are said to be His spiritual energy, para prakriti, because we're conscious. He's the supreme consciousness, we're little rays of consciousness or particles of consciousness. And because we're particles of consciousness, we have the same nature. Just as I gave the example, perfect example out here, you have this drop of seawater, is also salty. Or you have a sun ray, right? The sun is so powerful, giving off this light and heat, since time immemorial. And how is that light and heat met? Through the sun rays, right? It's made, and each sun ray is like has so many photons, and they have a little bit of light, a little bit of heat. So the sun rays are simultaneously one with the sun, but different from the sun. If you say, "Oh, let the sun in," move these curtains and let the sun. You're not letting the sun in. You're letting the sun rays in. You let the sun in, you burn everything. But because they're so similar, you recognize the quality is the same. So we have the same quality as Krishna, qualitatively one. Now, why is that important? Because after all, this whole thing that we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to perfect the effort that every living entity is going through, what to speak every human being. And that is to maximize our pleasure and happiness and minimize our suffering in this world. Right? That's just an understood. That's what life means. But we find, don't we, in the material world that as try as you might, you can't get happiness and the pleasure you're looking for. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. And try as you might, you can't ward off bad things that happen. I'll give you an example. I've had a very fortunate life. Of course, being in Hare Krishna for so many years. But even as a Hare Krishna, to have such a service. I've been editing these books for 50 years. What could be, more... I remember, devotees really want to, read Krishna book at a certain point. You want to read Krishna's Leela, and learn about it. But there's just not enough time to do all that, so you do it a little bit. So one of my services back in '94 was to go through the whole Krishna book and find out any discrepancies between what Prabhupada dictated and what was actually printed. Because in the early days, the editors and the transcribers and everything, it wasn't so perfect, so that some mistakes crept in, So they flew me all the way to Sweden, because at that time the book was being produced there. And one lady had spent 2 months going through, listening to the tapes. Practically unlike any other book, we have almost all the original dictation tapes for the Krishna book. Because a wonderful artist named Jadharani, who had so many paintings, she painted more than, some of these paintings are here by her, I don't know which ones exactly. I think that one in the corner of Mahavishnu is hers. Yeah. And she did so much work. So she wanted to listen to Krishna's Leela, Prabhupada, visualize it like this. Prabhupada is mostly spending his time in Los Angeles. He set up, it was the world headquarters. And they got a beautiful facility there. And so he stayed there for 8 months straight and developed the place. There were devotees joining it every day, you know, and he called the temple presidents. There were maybe 20 temples in America at the time. And he had the presidents come to LA and learn the stanzas of the morning program and the stanzas of the deity worship and then go back, you know. It was an incredible time in America. And he was planning to stay there and just write. But eventually he went to India and started a whole thing. So he's dictating Krishna book because he realized these devotees, you know, they're so sincere. They read what books were there? Well, there were the first part of the Bhagavatam that he wrote, the first canto. They're working on the second canto, but that hadn't been published. There was the TLC, which is the summary of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Ishopanishad, you may not even know about that book. It was one of the Upanishads that's about the Isha, that it's all about the personality of Godhead. And a few other small books, I forget of them. And so he said, they're chanting every day in the street so long, they're chanting Hare Krishna, but they really don't know the essential Leela of Krishna, what he did in Vrindavan and like that, you know. So I should give them that. So he did what he called a summary study, a running translation with some commentary, not the formal thing we have with Bhagavad Gita with all the verses and everything. Eventually that was produced. So he's in LA and the production staff is in Boston. So he's dictating, and you know they have little dictation tapes. He's reading the Sanskrit, dictating his translations and his comments, and then he has a tape that's filled. It has to be transcribed and then edited. You know, it didn't get transcribed and sent back to him where he would work out it himself. No, he was through with that. That's how we have so many books. So this Jadharani is sitting there in Boston as an artist. She wanted to hear the pastimes. So she had those little tapes made into regular cassette tapes. I don't know if you even know about those old cassettes. So that was what we had. So and then the other ones were transcribed and then sent back to Prabhupada. He was so frugal that he kept reusing those tapes. So he would speak over the original tape, but it had been copied. And so almost all of them, there's a few missing. So anyway, those tapes, I didn't listen to it, but this lady from Poland who knew English also, she listened. And when she saw a discrepancy with what Prabhupada said, what she thought might be a discrepancy, and the printed book, she would make a note of it, So after a few months, she finished the whole thing, and I was called to Sweden. And so I had her, you know, queries about the different things. So I would go through the whole Krishna book, and I would be reading it myself and finding, you know, mistakes on the printed page. But I would also be looking at it, Prabhupada said this, and then they said this, it should be something else. Sometimes whole sections they left out. I mean, I could go through that. So anyway, this was my service. Reading Krishna book. They gave me a tambura, because I was chanting verses, you know. It was a huge tambura. It was like 6 strings. It was, I think we have one now in the lounge, you'll see, like that. And I would chant verses. I'm sitting in this wonderful, you know, in Sweden they build everything with wood. So it was like a music box. I'm sitting there. And then I'd go to Mangalartik and beautiful deities, Gandharvika Giridhari, believe it or not. And wonderfully taking place. And I would lead some of the kirtans, many of them. And then, you know, give them some classes. And then they would have special breakfast for me. You know, they imported these fruits from Israel. So. And then all day I would read Krishna book. You know, the devotees who wanted to, you know, get 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here to read Krishna book, I would be reading all day. So this is my ideal service, you know. We got through the whole book, and then the book today, I can show you some of the things. So the point is that those pastimes are naturally attractive. The more purified you become, because that's our original home. That's where we came from. And we're part and parcel of Krishna. So that means that if we can please Krishna, we automatically become happy. You see? In other words, spiritually. That's why a kirtan, if you really get into it and you're hearing the holy name, there's a certain bliss there. What is that? You know, the same name again and again and again. You can't chant anything else like that, and you won't get the same thing. It's that specific sound, Krishna, because he's manifest himself through the sound of his name. There's verses about that, how that when you chant that name, you're actually associated with Krishna. And that's why, because it's so easy, there's no restriction. it's possible to do that yoga in this age and become completely perfect. Whereas otherwise, to try to do the Ashtanga yoga or any of this is impossible. So this chapter is very nicely giving us hints how to see Krishna everywhere. Oh boy, it's almost out of time. And to see him in the material energy. And we're going to learn, as tomorrow we have another class. We can maybe get this 6 that I read 6, right? Yeah. So 7 is a very important verse. We won't deal with it today, where he says that there's nothing superior to me. I'm beyond everything. And then we're going to read how he's present in all of the sensations we have: the taste, the fragrances, the light of the sun and the moon. And you can practice when you're walking on the street and you see some light, or you drink some water. You said, "Oh, this is Krishna," So we're kind of out of time. So I'll give you just one quick poem. This is a poem by Rupa Goswami verse, where he's comparing himself to the Chataka bird. The Chataka bird only drinks water that it catches in midair from the cloud, because it's very strict. And so it's famous for that. So he says, Vidachita mahidando, vidachita mahidando di nabando dayangba gatadihina babotta kachadanyamamasti. Dipatata shatakoti nibalang bang the bangbas tadabakilapiyod extuyate chatakena. The Chataka subsists on rain it catches in midair. And so it's always praying to the cloud to send its fare. Yet though that cloud may send a thunderbolt instead of rain, that bird continues praying fervently despite the pain. Just like the Chataka, I fix my mind upon one goal, and that is you, O Lord, most kind to every fallen soul. So whether it is punishment you send or mercy sweet, I'll always pray to you for service to your lotus feet. So this is encouragement not to be discouraged in devotional service, but to persevere and pray to Krishna for the strength and the ability to chant his name nicely. Okay, so we'll have a little kirtan. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you.